Hello and welcome to episode 75 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. Joining me, as always, is Neil.
Hello, Greg.
Hello, Neil. I love the fact you never seem ready for that. It's always
I'm never ready.
It's always good. The listeners appreciate it. Before we go too much further, Element Games. They are, one of our sponsors. They provide all kinds of awesome toys, and you can get 5% off on the pre-order weekend through GW, whatever they're doing. So Death Guard will be just about to release when this comes out. So you might be quick if you've downloaded this immediately. You might be quick enough to get on there and order some bits up. When we were at the event, I actually ordered my stuff online the night before and made sure it was ready to pick up in the shop, which is all groovy. And and their venue as well. So, and we will get onto it later, but their venue is looking really good. Particularly, it's the first time I've been there since they've done it up from when it was Marauder Games, and it's a world of difference. It really is. Somewhere you want to be, which is good.
Well, it does help, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely does.
I will take on, obviously, Lil Legend Studios, as we've discussed many times in the past. Miles is a bit of a painting guru. He can paint things for you, but one of his big things at the moment is painting lessons and tutorials. So go and check him out. He's running some classes, I believe, in America. I saw. Yes,
he is. So America and Canada. America and Canada, I believe. So he talks about this on Age of Darkness. So apologies if you listen to them, we're repeating this. But for those who might not do, he's heading out that way over the pond. I assume this is around the same time as the Adepticon trip because he's going to Adepticon. So it makes sense to kind of do it all in that one go. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I haven't looked at it.
That does work, doesn't it, if you're combining those two things together?
So I think it's North Carolina. I'm going to get this completely wrong. Go and check out Miles' Facebook page and his Twitter, Lil Legend Studios, and his Patreon as well. But certainly if you're out in America and you want to get some of that Miles action, then you might be able to go and experience his painting tutorials kind of face to face.
Yeah,
and his funny little accent they might not understand.
Yeah, I wonder, do they get on well, Americans with the Welsh accent?
We'll find out, won't we? I think generalising is a dangerous thing, but I've had people who speak fairly clearly but with different English accents where I've had, and even me at some point out there, where they've kind of gone, I didn't understand that. So, but it's different folks, different strokes, Some people, some Americans like to focus on America, some are a bit more worldly. I think that gamers have a bit more of appreciation due to the fact they generally get a lot of interaction on various formats of social media and listening to podcasts. So I know Kenny, the Combat Face podcast, will remark whenever he hears me use a word that he's never heard before, like codswallop. He always gets a little bit of a thrill for learning a new English word or term. So yeah, but yeah, no, that sounds really cool. Really cool. Yeah, brilliant stuff. And yeah, they're all going to Adepticon as well. There's a big invasion for Adepticon, which is going to be cool. I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be at Las Vegas in January instead. So, which is really cool because the Warhammer camp just announced by the guys up in Durham is around their Adepticon time, so I can go to it.
That's good.
Some of the others can't. Yes, in their faces. So yeah, that's really cool. But yeah, brilliant stuff. Neil, you haven't really posted on Instagram, even after someone actually tweeted us both to remind you to put something up.
I believe you're wrong there, because I have been tweeting on Instagram, just not Corax.
Tweeting on this, yeah, well, that's what we mean. He was specifically asking for hobby progress. So you're letting the side down, so I will put out the call again. Feel free to have a go at Neil and get him to put some hobby stuff up. Even I have, you see.
Is this your night that you've been...
yeah, the next night, as I say, I'm moving on, trying to get one night done, and then move on. It's all very well batch painting, but when it's nights and it's large areas, it can be a bit demoralising, particularly when I painted like all the main panels of silver that have obviously been sprayed blue because airbrushing, not needing to be neat with the airbrush because I know I'm going to go back over it. I've been doing like the main panels and then going back in and doing all the edges on the inside, where you need a little bit more care. After an hour of doing touch up and those bits of a night, you hold it back in your hand and go, well, from front on, doesn't look like I've actually done anything. But that's an hour's work and I'm claiming it. So I've almost
I've several times I've painted something and had to really sort of look at it deliberately from special angles, just so I can see the progress that I've made for a night's work.
Yeah, absolutely, and particularly with the nights when they're big as well. There's a lot going on, and I've actually got the GW night I'm doing at the moment. I purchased it off a friend, and he magnetised most things, so I've got all the different options as well. So it's like, oh yeah, I've done his hand, awesome. Oh yeah, no, I've also got a magnetised weapon option for that arm as well. Oh, and I've got the magnetised weapon option for the other arm and the various weapons that go on it. Okay, we'll get there. And he's getting there, but this one's almost to the point where I can slap a load of wash on it, which is, oh yeah, I forgot to do that bit. Oh, rubbish. And that's a stage which makes it go from like, oh, I'm still painting base coats to I've almost finished this model. Which is, you need those little bits to keep you going sometimes.
Yeah, no, I find it's sometimes good to try and just get to a fun bit, and hopefully then it spurs you on to get the rest finished.
Oh, none of it's fun. I just think finally I'm getting to the end of this model, which helps. It helps. It's like, this is almost done. If I only put in like another hour or so, then this night will be done and I can move on to the next one. It can join the ranks. I've got to do the bases. Got to work out how to do the bases yet, but I've just found a Night Lancer on Facebook for a reasonable price, reasonably very well posed compared to some of the Night Lancers I've seen being sold, and got that through in the post the other day. Unfortunately, he didn't really survive the journey very well. His lance is now in 3 bits, and
oh dear.
Yeah, thankfully the front of the lance has come off like where it sits in, so it's like that's fine. That's just like popped out. The glue's popped out, but the back of the lance has actually snapped, and it looks fairly clean. So I can fix it. It's fine. I might have to pin it. That's the only issue in pinning it. Got to make sure you get it straight, haven't you? Otherwise, it will bug you. So there's a little bit of work to do on that, but that was cool picking up. As I've said a few times now, keep your eye on those Facebook trading groups because there are some cracking deals. And there was a guy quite close to me put some stuff up on there, and I was 10 minutes after he put it up, and everything I wanted was gone.
That can happen easily.
Yeah, and actually, I keep seeing people put requests up. Oh, I'm looking for this. The head of Fulgrim or something else, and you're like, okay, good luck.
I've got a head of Fulgrim if anyone wants it.
Exactly, and it's amazing how many times those requests find someone who's got that piece. So it's well worth kind of doing if you are after anything specific. Like, I'm after these bits from this night. And you're like, why would anyone buy that night and not have those bits used? And it's like, well, they've gone and got another night somewhere cheap and used bits of that. It's quite funny sometimes what is available.
I think it's good that as we all know, I'm in search for a rat, which I'm still in search for. But yeah, sometimes you just need an odd bit, and it's useful that the community's there that can hopefully support that.
Yeah, it's easy to forget sometimes. I'm not a converter for the heresy kind of really. I'm happy to get them in, and I'll kit bash some Marines together. But when it comes to a night, I'm quite happy to put them together as they are. And even if I got doubles, I put them in a different pose, but I'm quite happy with that. But, there are some people out there who are quite happy to buy, well, I'll buy this night and I'll buy this night and I'll use those bits in this, and actually I'll use the other bits for another night. So basically I'm buying one night just to break down to its component parts to use elsewhere. And it's like, well, cool, Sometimes people just have that mad passion for a specific project. Like there was someone a while ago asking for a Warlord Titan that had been ruined accidentally. Pretty sure it was a Warlord. And because they wanted it for terrain, but didn't want to, obviously go out and buy a brand new Warlord. And there were like 2 or 3 people who were like, I screwed mine up, or this happened, and so I'm prepared to sell my Warlord cheaper.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a Warlord. It might have been a Reaver. But it's crazy how many times these things, how often searching for those bits comes up with a success. But
something I haven't really delved into too much. So I might.
Exactly. I'm more than happy. I've got more than enough to do. I'm selling off old armies and stuff, paying for my ticket out to Vegas and all that jazz. There's plenty going. So cool. Yeah. So you're still working away on Corax. Is he almost done?
He's very almost done. Yes, very almost.
Excellent. And maybe we'll see a picture of him soon.
Yeah, do you know what? If I get this base finished tonight, I think I might get a photo done this evening after we finish recording.
Wow. So people might have already seen it. Good.
So people have already seen it. So you chasing me, telling me that I haven't done it, it could look rather silly.
Except they've listened to the start of this podcast, so that's fine. It all works. People may have seen Neil putting up some photos on Instagram of what he got up to last weekend. We're going to cover that a little bit later in the show. So your trip to... Where did you go?
It was Alpha Games, and it was for
where's
the masterclass run by Richard Gray.
Sure. Where's Alpha Games?
Alpha Games is in Suffolk. It's I don't know if you want to go into this later, but it's in the middle of nowhere. So.
Okay, cool. No worries. Yeah, we can go into that later. But that's okay, cool. That means nothing to people outside the UK, I'm sure. And some people in the UK won't know where Suffolk is.
Someone referred it to, it's similar to, I'm trying to remember there's a part of America which is just basically flat, open fields and not a lot else. And they just said, it's just like that. Because it's just, he's literally in the middle of a load of fields. Like, you would never stumble across it.
Is it Iowa? That's all like that? Farmland?
That's it, Iowa. That's what they someone said, imagine Iowa. That's where this place is like it's based.
Cool. That's some awesome knowledge, if that's correct. Please tell me if we're wrong, American listeners. We try and pick things up, but I don't think I've known anyone who's ever been to Iowa, so I can't talk for it. Brilliant. That's cool. And we're obviously going to talk about First Blood a little bit later as well, which was in Stockport at Element Games. Might as well mention now we're selling tickets for Blood and Glory. They're going ahead, and it's one of those things where there is no limit on tickets at the moment, but buy them early, because at a big event like this, it's really handy to know that money's coming in so that the organisers know they can spend money. It makes a big difference when they've got a hall that's so huge that it can have these different game systems going on. It really helps them. And what that can mean is if Heresy tickets aren't selling, or Age of Sigmar tickets aren't selling, or slow down at some point, then they can go, okay, cool, well, we've given them this much space in theory, but actually, if we keep selling 40k tickets, then we'll keep filling it up and we'll reduce. Then we will start getting a limit, if you know what I mean. Because there's other events going on. There'll be events going on Friday and stuff like that as well. So if you are thinking of coming to Blood and Glory in Derby, first weekend of November, then I'd get your tickets in, purchase them fairly soon. I will be putting some stuff up at some point soon. I've got so much going on with looking at, we're looking at houses and trying to organise events and sort stuff out for other things. So I will try and get that up as soon as I can sit down at work and spend my work time doing hobby stuff.
Hey.
Oh, by the way, I've got this really important stuff to do and sneaking off and trying to get Blood and Glory stuff written up. But we'll hopefully have a really cool event there. And say, just get your tickets in. It's really good to see some names I've never seen before, I think, that are on the list already, which is really encouraging because, whether they listen to the podcast or not, it's always good to see new people. Hopefully, some of them might be newer to the independent scene. Some of them might just be in a different part of the scene, but it means there's a bit more cross-pollination there, which is good for everyone's events, really.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I've only been to 2 events, but I've recognised a lot of the same people. So yeah, you could get a bit stale, if you keep seeing the same people all the time.
Yeah, it certainly can, and also with it being in Derby, that's not it's easy to get there from the north east of England. It's not that difficult to get there from the northwest of England, and it's that little bit further south than, say, Stockport, which makes it just that bit easier to get to for south of London as well, and London generally, because sometimes with Stockport it's like you have to get the different trains, make a couple of changes. I think Derby you can go straight up. So hopefully that will all work. I just need to bug a few people at GW to get them to come along as well. We'll see. We shall see. Excellent. We should probably talk about, because we've only had a couple of what's going on with Forge World. Only had a couple of new things from Forge World. So should we mention them now rather than doing there's no point doing a section. We've moved away from that, haven't we?
We don't do a section anymore.
No, we don't. So we'll go straight into that with the Thousand Suns Legion Praetor. Lovely.
Yes. So this is, when did we first see this guy? This was he wasn't.
He was the.
Was he Weekender?
Yeah, he was going to be the champion for the Terminators, wasn't he?
That's right. Yes.
Based off of that, and so they've kept it back because they want to go a different way, and they brought him out as a Praetor, which is good that they're bringing him out, and that's cool. And he looks pretty cool.
He's actually one of my favourites. If I was going to buy that set when he was in that sort of group, I think he was definitely the reason to buy it.
He looks pretty tough, and hopefully we will get more alternatives for other legions as well. Hopefully, I suppose it probably depends how well this sells at the end of the day. It's very easy to make. Most of us have gone out and bought Prospero or Calth, and there's characters there you can use, and there's generic Praetors you can use. So you could see why that people wouldn't just go out necessarily and spend £25 on this guy.
Yeah,
because it's £25 for a guy that you might have a few versions of. Essentially, there is option, of course, just to take him and put him back in the Terminator squad if you really wanted to.
If you really liked him as part of that unit,
why not? But again, it's £25, so I think it would. Sales of that will definitely help, kind of push maybe other legions getting their Praetors, but you can't. I can see why people might not necessarily purchase him. Although if you're doing Thousand Suns, I do think he looks cool.
Yeah, it'd be a nice thing that I think maybe they could start looking at now that they've got a little bit more time to, as we've said before, they're catching up. They're going to be doing a bit of a catch-up session now with getting models done. It'd be nice to see these sort of extra things come out, like Legion-specific Praetors and all that sort of stuff. It could be quite cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see. Who knows exactly what's going on behind those doors, but we shall wait with bated breath. And then we get the third new Sakaran variant, the Omega Tank Destroyer. Yes. So this is the one where the length of the guns really divides some opinion. I don't mind them. I think maybe a little bit shorter. I think they look like they've been stretched out a bit. I don't necessarily think they're too long for the tank. I think there's potential for me to view them as being, if the barrels look a little bit too stretched. But I think it's cool. And looks really nice painted up in the Blood Angel stuff as well.
It was actually with this spate of new Sakarans coming out. Actually, it was one of these. You get a hobby itch.
Yeah.
I really want to buy. It sort of gave me that itch of, do you know what? I don't own a Sakaran. Or which one would I? Or maybe I'll get that one. Or
Yeah.
Realistically, it'd be a very bad purchase for me because I just do not have the time to get half my stuff done. But you have that. Those thought processes go on, not necessarily meaning that you're actually going to buy it. But yeah, I started considering buying one.
They are cool. I've seen a lot of chat because it's got the rules for them as well. So much like a lot of plasma weaponry, I was thinking you're getting 6 shots of this at strength 7. So it kind of sits mid-range. It's not strength 8, so it won't be insta-killing stuff. It's not, it's strength 7, so medium vehicles it can damage. 6 shots is a decent amount. But you're going to want to be moving it up and then firing it. Do you want the sponsons on there if you're going to be doing that? Because it's a Sakaran, it's not the most sturdy tank in the world. It does have the boosted version of firing a higher strength shot, which, if it penetrates a vehicle, does D3 hull points on top.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's been some really interesting discussion on this, and a lot of people have written it off as just middle of the road. If you want to kill troops, you'll take, the normal Sakaran, and that is also very good at doing other things as well. And if you want to kill tanks, well, you've got, the Arcos. The Arcos is so well rounded if you buy the different pods for it, that you can do tanks and you can do monstrous creatures and other stuff as well. So there's. Yeah, I can see arguments for it. I think this is like a gambler's tank, because if you're good enough to maneuver it to get those side shots where the armor's that pip lower usually, or you just feel like it's one of those things. Right? You can work out the odds of anything, right? And you can work out the value of a vehicle based on its average output. But if you only ever seem to roll 6s with your armor penetration with one vehicle, right, then it's obviously, and it's completely like illogical, but it's one of those things where, well, I'm just going to roll a 6, penetrate the armor, do an extra D3, boom, that's a tank dead, one shot. And that's without rolling the big 6 to kill it. So
yeah, see, I think. Personally, I like vehicles and things where people have underestimated them anyway.
Yeah,
so
I do think some people have written this off far too quickly. Rules wise, I do think there's a bit of that. Do I think it's the greatest thing in the world? No, but I think it's got potential, and obviously it depends what you're coming up against a lot of the time. If you're worried about that kind of thing, if your mate's bringing a Spartan and a Land Raider Phobos and something else, maybe it's not the greatest tank you want to take. But if they're bringing stuff which is more in that medium Sakaran level, then it has potential to be much more useful.
Yeah, because that medium Sakaran level, that sort of that one where you can get a cheeky side shot that's armor 12.
Yeah,
you get through that, it's a one-shot dead vehicle versus
no matter what you
possibly
roll,
penetrating a vehicle and going, no, it's still about okay, right?
Yeah,
fire some more stuff at it. Yeah,
Dreadnoughts is another one it can do quite well against.
Yes.
You only need a little bit of luck to get through, and okay. Oh no, I've rolled a Crusaken. Okay, well actually no, I've done an extra 3 hull points. Thank you very much. I think a good player could get some real kind of use out of this vehicle, and it's different again. There's no point in making a Sakaran that's the same as all the other Sakarans. We've heard they're not going to do a troop transport for Sakaran because they don't want to give it everything. The Rhino's the kind of multi-purpose vehicle that became the template for various versions. The Whirlwind and the later on the Predators already, but later on the Razorbacks, stuff like that. Having a fast vehicle that can only load 6 people in it, I can see why people want it. It would be cool, but let them come out with something else. Have the Sakaran as the weapons platform. That's cool. whether they should come out with a vehicle that can transport 20 powered armoured Marines for a lot cheaper than a Spartan, yeah, that would be cool. I think there's potential for that. But, Sakaran's not going to beat that. The Sakaran is what it is. And we've got we've got 4 now that do different jobs. Is the Arcus the best one if you upgrade it? Probably. In terms of all-round capabilities, if I was going to an event and I was worried I had certain weaknesses in my list, so I was worried about facing Mechanicum robots and potentially, a few other bits and pieces, you can go, right, well, I'll take the Arcus and I'll give him 2 or 3 ammo. Yes, he's expensive, but in 1 or 2 matchups, he becomes invaluable. That's where that is a brilliant tank. The Sakaran's always a good tank, the standard one. The Venator, all I hear is people saying, well, it never actually does anything because it's so low on shots that you only need a small amount of bad luck for it to have no effect on the game.
I find as well with the Venator is I usually see that as like
target number 1.
Target number 1, that's going to cause me grief if that hits my Spartan or, something like that. So I end up, it's just, right, take that out now. And usually because they're quite soft, that if you focus fire on, say, your first turn, you're going to kill one of those.
Yeah, and that's it. And then people have said that about this, it's not going to get into position or not going to be able to shoot anything. It's like, well, it does as well as any other Sakaran at the end of the day. They're not the hardest tanks in the world. You have to protect them. But it's quite interesting just to read those people's views, and certainly some of the better players that I know, and obviously I don't know everyone commenting on these things, but some of the better players I know were saying, look, hold on, let's not write it off. But then they may be thinking, well, I know it's not for option number 1, but I still want to use it, which is cool. Saw a number of people talking a lot. There's been a lot of rules talk, and then every now and then someone's like, I really love it, I'm just going to use it. And I think even in the Heresy we often talk about taking lists that we think are cool and not bringing the best army we can, but playing into the lore of the Heresy. And we've commented on the show a number of times that actually sometimes they are one and the same thing. Right? The lore doesn't, playing your army to how the stories read is not necessarily a negative on the power level of your army. But the conversation a lot of the times very quickly turns from, oh, I like it, but... Yeah. And it's really hard to find now, I think. We talk, in fact, Max played at First Blood, and this isn't really relevant specifically to that weekend, but he bought pretty much the same army he took to Sweden. And in Sweden, he scored the lowest total that anyone has ever scored in any Swedish event under their points system, because you can get minus points out there, by over double.
Oh.
And he bought a list which was maybe just above halfway at First Blood. So, when we talk about how we play lists, and in fact there was a guy on another podcast and which talks about, not bringing those lists, and he was talking about his Mechanicum army having like 3 Voltaracs. And it's like, okay, cool, but they're really Voltaracs are one of those things that can really, if you can't deal with it, they can dominate a game. And I think if you did that in England, people would be like, really? If someone were to bring 3 Voltaracs to my events, I'd be keeping a close eye on how well they did and what they did. Because it's very much an option where it's like, well, yes, they are good. They are very good. Do you need 3? That approach. And that's fine. We all have our levels that we play the game in. But it's very easy to see that there's a huge scope of that because, Max's list wasn't bad, but obviously some groups play harder than others. And there are some players, and there's one maybe I've let her get away with him a little bit actually at a couple of my events who brings lists and he plays well. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I haven't affected him as much as I should have, because it's easy to miss sometimes. So it's a real, interesting fact, particularly the Sakaran variants, have shown that, rules do drive sales, even in the heresy. And they always will to a certain point, and I agree. You don't want to turn up to a game and bring something which is useless. You absolutely don't. You don't want to do that too many times, should I say. You don't mind doing it once or twice. But when something fails you all the time, and because of these failures you're getting more and more, less wins, you're struggling more and more, at some point you go, you know what? I just want to bring something where I can compete. So, they're always going to drive it a little bit. But there's a real interesting kind of thing, and maybe it's worth looking at other events. Maybe it's worth getting more kind of lists published to see how other people do things and whether the scenarios affect it more or what have you. There's a lot of interesting stuff to look at. Some people might not think it's interesting. Some people will, I'm sure. Some people probably just say, what are you talking about? Get on with it. But, it's a really hard, when you've got a tournament, or you've got a game which is generally played that way, you can very easily set expectations by comping and those kind of things. However, if I were to comp my event and say, okay, so Mechanicum, if you're playing this, you can't bring more than this or whatever, then actually all that says is, right, you can do whatever you want up to this level. And people will tend, because they do it at tournaments, they will tend to go, right, what can I fit in under these restrictions? Because these restrictions are designed to level the playing field. So if I hit them, I should be doing, okay.
Yeah, it just resets the level from, very high to medium, doesn't it?
Yeah, I actually think it encourages people to push a little bit further as well, like where they might not have before. So it's kind of how to kind of describe it, but say if I knew there were restrictions to limit some armies so obviously these people have had issues with these armies. So so when Jeff brings his army, he's going to be near the top of this. I'm going to have to compete with that. So I'm going to have to try and bring something that can at least, last 5 turns against it. And that person then might bring a much more kind of combative force than they wanted to or usually do. And then might misread it and, as say someone else has actually gone, nope, I really, really like my 3 Sakarans with big plasma cannons, or whatever. And find they're having trouble every game. So it's a really tough thing to hold. And as we've said a number of times, you're still going to get games where the dice rule it. You're still going to get complete mismatches. I had to step in at First Blood against Max's army, and if I hadn't immobilized his Leviathan, then he would have rolled me in about 3 turns. It's just his army worked really well against my army. Those things are still going to happen. So yeah, lots of stuff to think about, but some cool models from Forge World. Full shizzle.
Yeah, definitely. They're always cool.
We haven't had any info about a European Open Day, have we?
No, I don't.
Because that was October last year.
Interestingly enough, as well, with the Golden Demon calendar. Do you remember they had the International Golden Demon?
Yeah.
They haven't mentioned that either.
No, they haven't. You're right. Interesting. So maybe they're not doing one, but.
Shame.
We'll keep an eye on that. Yeah, definitely a shame. And if you are in Europe and you attend regularly, I'd encourage you to ask Forge World to find out what's going on, because if you're disappointed, it's stopping, obviously. Because it would be a shame if maybe it isn't viable. Maybe they don't have the numbers are turning up. I don't know. I've not been to one, but it looks like we're waiting now till. There's a 40k open day.
Yes, with the Golden Demon attack.
Yeah, when's that? Oh, November?
Well, it doesn't. I don't know. Have they announced the dates yet? I'm not sure they have.
I'm trying to remember. I know Warhammer World put up their events for November. I think it might be in November because they've blessed them. They've organised the Heresy doubles the same weekend as Blood and Glory's on, which is not ideal. So I think it might be in November, but we can, the way they've written their new books, they can release stuff in November that can be Heresy because it has 40k rules. Yes. But you wouldn't necessarily expect them to release Space Wolves for 30k at that, but maybe they do.
They could do. Maybe, you never know.
And bearing in mind this 3-month kind of thing, maybe we don't get an event. There's no real event, is there, to spark the next 3 months?
No. Yes,
so August, September, October, November. That's 3 months. And maybe it is 40k, and maybe they will utilise that 40k day to set up December, January, February to take us through to the Heresy weekender.
So you never know. We might even end up with possibly some stuff coming out from Forge World that we haven't seen. Possibly.
Well, yeah, no. I've only really started thinking about it while we've been online, on here chatting. So, who knows? Who knows? We're into September now, halfway through September. So, I just thought, that European Open Day. I don't know. We'll see. We'll I'm sure we'll get a little bit out of what's going on at Forge World soon. I think we've warbled on enough for the first part of the show. Should we come back and talk about your experience of learning how to paint?
Yes, let's do that.
For the first topic, we're going to talk about Neil's little painting weekend. So, it was Alpha Games?
It was at Alpha Games, and we did mention before that Alpha Games is in the middle of nowhere, and it really is in the middle of nowhere. Like, I thought to myself, oh yeah, it'll be a small town or something, or there'll be, an industrial estate or something, but no, it is literally fields, and then, oh look, there's a little hut. And then that's Alpha Games.
Okay, cool.
So, and even to the stage where I was driving there and the mobile phone, I was using maps on my phone, and suddenly all the maps disappeared off my phone. I still had the route, but it was all just a grid. I had no actual. And then when I got there, I went, I've got no signal. So I went in and I was waving my phone about, and Daddy came over and just said, "You won't get any signal here." He said, "There is no signal." At all. So it was really out in the sticks.
Fair enough. And that's in Suffolk, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah. Great of you. I mean, obviously it's, it is what it needs to be. It's quite rough and ready. He's obviously doing a lot of work to it and expanding. It's getting, the shop part is obviously relatively small. There's a decent sized gaming area. There's several different rooms dotted about, and he's expanding into the other part of the the unit, as it were, and he's going to be, he's decorating it and sorting it all out, and he seems to be building quite a good little community there, because he said that where it's positioned is in between a lot of big towns, so people can drive there from lots of different locations, and then people just turn up and play all night, and he keeps it open till 10 or midnight nearly most nights. So it's got a lot of people going there. Even when we were there on the course, there was quite a few people turning up playing games, obviously of all varying types. So yeah, he's doing really well.
Cool. So this is in Suffolk for those abroad who might not know quite as well. If you look just above London, where England bulges out a little bit, he's basically right in the centre of that. I've just looked it up on my phone as you were chatting. And, definitely the middle of nowhere. I'm guessing there were lots of fields of cabbages or stuff like that. It's that kind of country, isn't it? Norfolk, Suffolk area. Okay, yeah, that is. I mean, Bury St Edmunds down the road, and a couple of, Thetford's a well-known town, but they're far enough away to make it a little bit of a journey.
But I think that's what he allude to the fact that the reason it works for him is obviously the rent is really low.
Absolutely.
And it means he can make it work. He said, like, rent in town centres is just too much to keep everything going. So you could see there's a logic behind how he's set up and what he's doing. And I think he's gone about it the right way. You know, he hasn't, like, sort of just gone in there and thrown loads of money at it, or, you know, just gone crazy and bought loads of stuff. It's all like a very slow burn, let's say. And it really looks quite. I think it'll be really good in the future. I hope he does more, because he's doing quite a lot of other painting events himself. I hope he sort of builds it into one of those sort of venues where, you know, you can go down there for a class, because obviously there's no worries about parking or anything like that. And
so how many tables roughly can he fit in there?
Gaming tables. He's got 2 main gaming rooms. We were in one room, and there was another room adjacent to that. And I would say, I think he said he could get, if he put all the tables next to each other, it was like sort of 5 tables in each.
Sure. Okay.
So, but he's expanding into another part of the unit as well. So once he's got that, I think he'll have quite a sizable open gaming area. So, could be quite good. I mean, we had 3 tables set out, which obviously was pretty much a table with an extension lead. You brought your own lights and set up, and then we were all sort of grouped up in like 3s and 4s.
Sure.
And we just basically walked over to Richard, who was obviously running the course. So probably worth saying that obviously Richard Gray, for those who don't know, is a 2-time Slayer Sword winner. He's done numerous demons over quite a long span of time. So he's been doing it a long time. And he has a very particular style. It's a very realistic style. So very realistic weathering and realistic freehand that he does onto his models.
So we chatted about this a little bit a couple of days ago. And I showed my girlfriend the pictures, actually, of the work he'd done. And it's very classical, like almost kind of I don't know what the era is for the painting, but very much the kind of painting you might see in an old stately home in England.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
It's fine art style.
Yes. He's miniaturizing realistic. You know, if he's painting a skull or an eagle or whatever, he's a moth or whatever he's recreating, he's using proper reference material and recreating that on a knee pad, door,
sure.
whatever it may be.
And in fact, because you post up the pictures on Instagram just of the skulls you were working on, and I think to me it looks like Richard's belongs in a painting. You know, it's very much, and I'm thinking of those old dark, like I don't know if they're medieval, probably later than that, but where kind of the characters come out of the darkness, whereas yours is more like a modern stylistic approach that you would maybe a street artist has put on a building or something like that, you know, but in a clean style.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I noticed, so we had 2 days on this painting course. So day 1 was we're all given a rhino door and said, right, what we're going to do is paint a skull on this rhino door. So it was very much sort of like a 7 or 8 step process. Richard would show us the first step. We'd all have a good look at it, and he would explain what he was doing, how he was doing it, and we would go and replicate that stage, then go back, watch, and repeat until we had the end product. So there was a lot of talk at the start of, you know, what he was doing, how he was doing, referencing all the sort of stuff, the light, etc. But of course, when you start off, his style, the way I paint is, I try and be as clean and tidy and neat as possible throughout every process to give myself a very slick, smooth, clean look. And Richard does a very different sort of rough, ready sort of creating texture with his paints and building up very slowly. So at the start, it looks very rough, and the more he puts into it, the more texture he gets. And then it's almost like right at the very end, it all comes together, and then suddenly you see all this fine detail, and it all looks really realistic. So when we started painting the skull, I was copying his work, and what he'd shown us to do. But I was doing it in my own sort of way. So I was, when I was painting the base colours, I was getting them as flat and as smooth as possible. whereas he was very much more building up the texture. So it was a very different sort of process. And it took me, I mean, obviously, when I did the first skull, I very much went off on a tangent, because by the time I started smoothing everything out and blending and putting lines and trying to pick out all the detail, we sort of diverged completely. His had turned into a much more realistic, textured piece of art, and mine had turned much more stylistic, smooth, and sort of stood out more from the black door. And it was very interesting how I sort of took a lot from that seeing someone else's style, seeing how they paint something, and seeing a difference in technique, where I've always strived to keep it as smooth and as clean as possible, because I've always deemed that gives me the best results. But seeing someone get a fantastic result from a very much more, to me it looked very haphazard. It was very sort of rough and ready. It was very interesting to see how that came together. So it really did sort of, it sort of made me see more realistic things, and the way to paint them. It made it a bit more real for me, and I've sort of taken a bit from that. So I'm quite pleased with what I took from that first day. And I did put them all up on Instagram. I put them out there. I gave a little nod to, right, which one do you think is best, guys? I obviously on my Instagram got a lot of, well, yours is better. And then I think Rich saw it, decided that obviously he wasn't too happy with that, put his own up with his finished piece versus mine. And it was quite funny that it was a very split decision. And he had a lot of people saying they liked mine because it was a cleaner, sort of standout style, and a lot of people liking his because of the realism. So it's interesting how the community views the different styles and what they think of them.
Yeah, I almost don't think it's realism. I think it's just different styles, because both are real, because they're both approaching a paintwork. Richard's doesn't necessarily look like it's coming out of the page at you per se, because it still feels very painted because of the nature of the way it fades away and things like that. But,
yes, it sort of sinks into the background, doesn't it, Richard?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I understand what you mean by real, but I'm not 100% sure that realistic's the right term for it. But you have two different styles. It's like comparing an impressionist to, I don't know, a classic style of painting. It's like rap and hip hop.
Yes,
they're different styles.
In fact, actually, one thing he did mention on the first course, because this is the second course he's run with the same teaching method, the same topic. He mentioned that on the first course, one of the students sort of took, when he was talking about using reference material, took it literally, found a picture of a skull, or they had a reference picture, and exactly copied it onto the door.
Right.
And everyone was saying how, he's done the best. He's copied that perfectly. And Rich was very keen to say it's not about copying the skull exactly. It's about using it as reference and creating your own version of what you want to appear on the door, but not to use it as an exact reference. So copying every last detail of that skull, every crack, every proportion to it.
Sure.
Because his skulls have their very own unique look.
Yeah.
And they have long teeth and, bits bulge out where maybe bits shouldn't bulge out. And it's just because he does sort of create it a bit off the top of his head as well as using reference material. Yeah,
and I suppose that you're going to his class, so he's trying to teach that, and so he can say that. However, if you can replicate an image, and I remember years ago, someone like 9-10 years old, just before I left primary school, meeting this guy who could copy anything you wanted to put in front of him. If you had a picture, he could draw it, freehand, copy it. But if he had to do something out of his own head, he couldn't do it, like anywhere near the same level. Does that make him less skilled? Not really, because they were almost, perfect copies kind of thing. But if you can do that on an army scale, then that's a hell of a skill, because you've suddenly got the same image. It's almost like they've gone round and actually, this is how we paint these. Boom, stamp them out on all the vehicles, and that's awesome. Yes, and a lot of people would love that. To be able to get the same thing repetitive across the whole army would be amazing. Think of shoulder pads. when they don't look the same, sometimes it draws your eye in a bad way.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So, but you know, Richard's obviously making those comments based on the fact that he's sold a ticket for something where you learn his style. So
yes, and that's ultimately that's what we were there for. And I did feel at the end of it that where I'd and it was an organic thing. I didn't go out there to think, oh, I'm going to do this completely my own way. It's just my own style sort of took over. But I did feel as though, right, you know, on the second day, I thought, no, I'm going to try and make sure that I stick to the rules per se, and try and stay as close as I could to his style, because that's what I was there to learn. That's what I wanted to, you know, get a feel for. So I very much on the second day, where we had to paint the Terminator, we had to do weathering and damage and recreate the skull in a much miniature form. I copied that more to his style and tried to keep it as close as I could to that.
Was that any good for you, doing it that way?
Yeah, I think so. It was certainly, I felt more at ease because I felt as though I was doing something that I wasn't too worried about making it perfect. And I don't know whether or not that sort of made it a lot easier for me, if that makes sense. Right. I was, you know, I didn't feel as though I had to try and make it completely smooth and perfect and make sure that the blend was nice and clean. I was a bit more rough and ready. I was a bit more, I still had, you know, trying to keep because one of the key things with these classes, a lot of things come down to brush control. If you've got a good brush control and you've got, you know, like one part of the second day was glazing the shoulder pad to give it a blend. Now, obviously, that's not going to be an issue for me. I do that day in, day out. So I did that, and I was mucking about doing other things at the same time. But it was still, I found the second day a lot more relaxing. So I didn't feel as though I was trying too hard, if it makes sense. I wasn't trying to do my own thing. So I found it quite relaxing. I found the chipping and the weathering side, although I don't think he told me anything that I didn't know, because obviously when he was explaining about how he does a chip he paints on the colour, then he draws a little line underneath it, and all, I was thinking, I know all that. It was interesting to hear his logic behind where the chips go and how big they are and the placement, because a lot of the time with chipping, it's very easy to create a pattern without realising it.
Yeah. And
you start off putting them what you think is randomly, then when actually you look back, you think, no, I've just done 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and all around the model, and then suddenly it doesn't look real. So it was interesting to hear how he does them, how big he does them. He talks very much about putting a chip on and then leaving a little area of paint within the chip to make it look as though the paint is still holding on behind the rust, all this sort of stuff. So it was very interesting.
Okay, cool. Trying to remember what I was going to say now. So that was a 2-day course.
Yes.
Roughly how much is that?
Do you know what? I haven't got the price to hand.
Okay,
I seem to remember it was like between 120 and 150.
Yeah,
I think it was 150.
Okay. And obviously you went for the specific reason of expanding your kind of knowledge base for painting competition.
Yeah. I think for me, I think all painters generate a style.
Yeah.
They become good at a particular thing, and you can get caught in that. Now, I still enjoy what I'm painting in that style, but I felt as though, why not try and push the boundaries a bit, see what other things work well with and what don't work well with. And it was very refreshing to try something different, and it probably would give me the confidence to replicate that maybe on a competition piece. I was trying to think how I could combine the two styles, because I was thinking very much about my highlighting and how I, where I put my object source lighting and all these sort of things, and thinking his style really would not fit very well with that. When I was looking at his pieces that he had brought, some of his demon-winning pieces, it was very interesting that I was looking around the model thinking, it's fantastic, but nothing's highlighted the way I would highlight it. Nothing's blended the way I would blend it, because the way I do it is not realistic enough to then allow him to do the more realistic freehand and the realistic weathering, because the two don't sit well together.
No, certainly the weathering and chipping and that, and your ultra kind of clean, like high fantasy style.
Yeah.
The bright, as you say, the bright shiny lights, the non-metallic metals that you do and stuff like that. They're almost diametrically opposite. And I suppose a little bit of chipping on a nice clean model to show battle damage is one thing, but to actually weather it up is a different thing. I suppose you could do it to a point. It would have to be very controlled and limited. Like I could imagine, doing an Iron Warriors guy or something like that, where that light's shining off the silver, but actually still hasn't repaired all of the bits of his armor.
Yes, yeah, it has to be weathering that is also has got that sort of fakeness to it that would fit in with the non-metallic metals that I do and things like that, so that it would fit in with the style. I
think you could do it, but it would almost have to be comic booky to fit in with that, as you say. The only other thing I was thinking was something like a Blood Angels or Emperor's Children, where you could have a banner or you could have something else alongside it. So the Marine himself maintains your style, but he can be holding up a banner which is darker.
Yes, yeah, that would definitely.
So something either that or a contrast of potentially in a duel, if you could do a light darkness kind of duel, with sunlight kind of thing, something like that. But once you start going that far, it becomes a much bigger job. But okay,
yes, yeah, no, it was interesting because I was thinking of banners myself to try, and if I had to replicate the skull or do something, I was thinking the only place I could make that work would be on a banner.
Yeah, on something like that where you've got a dedicated area that they would decorate, and then that creates a barrier between the styles, which works as a kind of a framing thing, but also to separate them, but still keep them in one piece. That could work very well. That's cool. So, I mean, the other people on this course, kind of what level would you talk to them much about where they were with their painting, or?
Yeah, I mean, good point actually, because obviously I knew two of the guys on there anyway, because one of my friends, Flinny, was there.
All right, yeah.
We've gone to. He's won a couple of demons himself. He's. It was very interesting. He did a skull on a door before we started the course, and it was pretty ghastly. So it was interesting to see. Obviously, he greatly improved on his second attempt once he'd had some tuition. But it was very interesting to see his starting point before, just having a stab at it before he'd even looked at it. So he was there. Ellis Kay was there. He has won quite a few. I think he's won 8 demons. So he's won a lot. He's been to a lot of demons. So he's very accomplished himself. So there was some good levels of painting there. And then there was a very broad spectrum. So you had people there that, have obviously done quite a lot of painting, maybe other courses, to people that, haven't, painted that much. I mean, there was another podcast there, a guy from the Spacemen with Guns podcast. Yeah. And he was there, and, his painting, you could definitely see a marked improvement in his painting over the course. There was another demon winner there. I think his name was Ben. It was interesting because it was the guy that had won bronze in the heresy vehicle category.
Right.
So obviously Rich Gray was there,
gold.
I was there silver, and Ben was there bronze.
Cool.
So we were all in the same room. But yeah, it was interesting because there was different levels, and there was one guy there that he just kept saying how bad he was. But I think with these courses that actually you need a level of blush control. You need to know roughly what you're doing. But there is so much, you're taking it in such small steps that when you lined up all the doors, say on day one, you wouldn't say that anyone there was awful. That, you've really wasted your time. You haven't really grasped any of these concepts. They really had picked up a lot from that day. And I think I was talking to Ellis about it in around the end of day one, and he said, "How have you felt what you've taken?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I feel as I've got a few little bits and pieces out of this." And he said, "It's a bit of the diminishing levels that you can improve at when you get to a certain level. It's all just about really small increases rather than a massive leap in technique or knowledge, because you've sort of covered a lot of those things off already."
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what you're looking at. You're looking at that, those 5%, those marginal increases, as they're described in sport.
Yes,
It's looking for that rounder wheel, like the British cycling team did. They spend millions on getting a rounder wheel, and it does help them, which just sounds crazy to anyone who's not really kind of involved in the sport. Do you think it's harder to go there having a developed style yourself?
Yeah, I've probably found that bit probably the hardest of all. Obviously, being quite accomplished and being there, I think there was a big level of being when you're told, like when he would come up and go, no, you've done that wrong. You've done that wrong. You should be doing it this way. You sort of feel like going, no, I'm very happy with what I've done. I think what I've done is very good. Because obviously I'm maybe not following the rules, and he's trying to teach it in a particular way. So it is harder if you're more accomplished, because you've got your own set style. If you are a bit newer to painting, you're probably going to take the direction a lot better, because you're being told, do this. I mean, level of brush control comes into it, but after that you are pretty much, it's almost a bit of paint by numbers. You're taking one colour, you're putting it down on a wet palette, and you're just applying it in a particular shape or technique that he's showing you. So if you could replicate that shape, it wasn't too hard to pick up.
Cool. And if you were someone who'd been brush painted a basic army and wanted to actually start to move on to increased competencies, or maybe look at competition style painting, do you think that monetary value was worth it?
Yeah, I think the course was much more aimed at creating more competition pieces, if that makes sense. I think you've got lots of different courses out there at the moment. Miles is doing tuition. You've had like the MKA courses that are around for ages. Andy Wardle's doing them. And I think you need to decide what you want to do with your painting, because if you're doing much more of, I just want to make my armies look a bit better, I want to, learn how to use an airbrush, etc. There are courses out there that would do that a lot better. This course was much more, I would say, if you feel as though you're quite good at painting, but you fancy trying a bit more of a display piece or something more, if you fancy entering Golden Demon, because you were learning things I couldn't see you saying, do you know what, I'm going to do that across my whole army. I'm going to paint these skulls on all the doors of my rhinos. It was more a case of you creating a display piece, do some freehand, etc.
Centerpiece or competition models.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. Yeah, and as you say, there are plenty, and it's crazy in a way. I got contacted by one of the people at CK Studios, and if you don't know them, you don't listen to the independent characters, because they're Carl and Adan and Justin as well, I think, went to one of their courses, and they've been kind of, a lot of people in England have been asking them to come over. Obviously, through the podcast, they identify with them. The same sort of happening with Miles going to America, MKA going out to Sweden and Australia. It's weird that the audience has come through these things when there are other people who are probably doing a similar level of, work, because by all accounts they're getting the same sort of feedback. So they're coming over to England, I think, next year probably, hoping to do a course, and I'll try and keep in touch with them for when they do that. While Miles is going over there, there's people doing these things all over, and CK very much are here's how to use your airbrush to paint a whole army quickly, effectively, to a good level. Not to say it's basic, but it's a decent level. Whereas, you can go further with that if you can find the right place, whether it's going to one of these courses or one-on-one tuition maybe with the few people that do that, like Miles. There's lots of options.
I think there's a key thing of you've got to decide what you want out of it, because there's no point going on a course and thinking, well, that was great, but I don't know if I'm ever going to use those techniques in my day-to-day painting. Yeah. So, I think there's a place for all of them. I think the key thing you've got to really weigh up is what you want out of the course. And I felt as though it was really a really good course. It was really well run. The venue was good. It was all very relaxed. We all had a good laugh. But yeah, you've got to make sure that it suits what let's face it. When everyone's set up, the daylight lamps, the LED ones that most people. I think have you got one of the ones where you can adjust the brightness and the etc. It was just basically banks of those. So there were a few people getting brand new ones out of boxes. Yeah. Some people that already had them. Some people had the older tube versions, and you could your serious painters generally have those sort of lamps. Yeah. So it was very much sort of, oh look, everyone's got the same sort of kit. It's you could tell that's what people were there for. There wasn't many people. I had a different type of lamp because I've just got a different one that I use for my painting, and there was a couple of people that had slight variation, but you could tell people were on the same sort of page.
Yeah, well, I think there was. Even from my point of view, getting an airbrush, I still don't use it like anywhere near the level that I probably should be, but it's easy to Google or to talk very quickly to someone, and the airbrush, the compressor, whatever type you get, whether it's Badger or Iwata or what have you, it's very easy to find which are like the range you want and which light is the most cost effective for giving you what you need, because some of these lights are expensive, but boy is it worth. When I got this light that was 80 quid, it was like, wow, that's different. It makes a hell of a difference having that, the right tools. And all that information is available online or by quickly emailing someone or tweeting them or Instagram or whatever, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and it's always worth if you like what someone's doing online or you see it, it's always worth asking the questions like, oh, what do you use? What brushes are you using? What light are you using? What paints are you using? I must admit, there's been a weird thing recently with Patreon where people seem to be more secretive about their paints and things, and I'm not a big fan of that. I think if you ask someone, oh, what colours did you use to paint that model, you should be like, oh, I use this one, this one, this one. I don't see the point of, oh, well, you have to log on to my Patreon if you want to know what colours I've used.
I don't blame them to a point when I've seen a couple of painters, particularly kind of the way Patreon works, maybe needs to be reviewed in that people are signing up to get information, then quickly signing off again, either having only paid 1 month or not even having paid that month because Patreon takes to the end of the month, which is, downright dirty, to be honest.
Oh, really?
And one of the major painters basically said if you do it and you try and sign up again, you're blocked, which is completely understandable because, the way they want to do it. That is one of the potential pitfalls of Patreon, that and a growing market as well. You've got to provide what you're providing for. But yes. So I can completely understand why people would do that if they're earning money from the thing, but it does become a little bit of a, but the problem is you'll get someone who does it for less or for free, and if they don't necessarily have to be as good as you, they only have to be almost as good as you for other people to just go, well, that'll do. So it's a hard thing, and it's a hard business if you want to make that your living. I think you've got to work hard at it, and you've got to either provide something other people don't, or be absolutely in demand. But the only other thing I was thinking of when we were talking about kind of would you go on one of these courses, I would also think that Richard Gray one, he is he's quite different in his style than a lot of people, and that helps. At the moment in the Heresy, it's very easy to tell the 10 armies at an event that have been on an MKA course. And
yes, there's a certain look, isn't there?
Yeah, and it's not a bad thing, but it is very easy to tell. It's like, oh yeah, they're all MKA guys. They've got great looking armies, so you can't knock them for that. But I do think if you are going for competition or you want to win best painted at Heresy events, you want that kind of thing, you could potentially say, look, all these 5 armies painted in the same style. Of course, there's going to be slight variations, but wow, that one's painted differently. And that's always going to help you stand out from the crowd, isn't it? It's always going to help you get a nomination or whatever.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think if you're looking for, because the great thing is Richard, as you said, Richard Gray's style is so unique. There's not many. I wouldn't say there's many painters out there that are doing what he's doing.
No, not in GW going.
It's a lot of people. The style I do, there's quite a few painters that have that sort of style. So you're always being compared. You could probably compare me to several other painters. You would say was exactly the same as Richard Gray, which I suppose is a real benefit. I think Andy Wardle's doing a very similar thing at the moment. He's sort of striking out in very much his own sort of style, and that has benefits. And if you want to go on one of his courses, you're going to see something a bit different. Yeah,
and I think he's helped by moving away from GW competitions and models for a little bit, experimenting other places. That's always going to, because it's not just learning a technique. Sometimes it's a different style of model that can make you think differently. You can approach things differently. We're in the Heresy. A lot of what we're going to paint is power armor and Rhino, Sikaran, or the Spartan chassis, those kind of things. But if you can move out of that and suddenly you're painting a lot more skin, you might experiment a lot more with that kind of thing. But there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of these courses up. Are you going to look at you got anyone else in mind, or are you happy?
I've said to myself I wanted to get to several, and it all depends on what times they come up, because a few have come up and I've looked at the dates and I'm doing something else on that day or something. But David Soper runs a few, so I want to get to one of his.
He's quite useful.
Again, very unique sort of style that he's got. So again, would really like to see that. Andy Wardle's struck out on his own, doing his own ones now. So I want to get to one of his ones as well. I think he's running a non-metallics one and more of an airbrushing one. And I said to him, the winner's day, that I would probably go to an airbrushing one, because that's something I don't really do. So it'd be very interesting to do that. So I've got a few in mind. If I see other ones crop up, I probably will end up going to. I want to try and get to quite a few.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's I think I did really enjoy it. So it'd be great to see what's going on.
Awesome, excellent stuff. Well, I think we've covered most things there. If anyone wants us to ask any more questions, you can ask Neil directly, of course. Obviously, all the details we'll put at the end of the show, or send it in and we can answer on the show as well, because it is a very interesting subject. And I think we've got potential in this show actually to go a bit more back to basics with painting advice as well. I think sometimes we very easily get caught up in going higher level, which is completely understandable. And the fact that my advice is very simple, just try and keep it between the lines. It's the way I paint. So maybe we can if people have got any questions painting wise, we will have to do a painting show again soon. I think it'll be hopefully more based around people asking questions, ideas, what have you. Awesome. We'll leave that there. We'll come back and we'll talk about First Blood. Now we're going to take a look at the First Blood event that was held at Stockport Games a couple of weekends ago, if you're listening to this when it comes out. And Stockport Games, Element Games in Stockport, should I say. Getting stumbling on my words already. It's always good to see. So this was a smallish event. We had 18 players turn up in the end, a couple of dropouts, which can happen very easily. Certainly, I know the guys from London going up on the Friday had a bit of a longer journey. We got diverted off the motorway at Birmingham to take the lovely Pennine route through to Manchester, which added a considerable drive time, probably added 2 and a bit hours.
Wow, that's a lot extra, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Sod's law, isn't it? M6 was a major issue. So we end up having to travel like 30 odd mile an hour through some very lovely countryside. But I'd rather just get my foot down and get there. Yeah, that's the nature of, it was always going to take a certain amount of time from where I am anyway. But it was good to get up there and check out Element Games as well, because that's the first time I've been there since they've done it up. And it's fantastic. Even the fact that they're not using, they've changed the entrance around, so it's a much nicer way in. The fire escape that they were using regularly as just a hangout point wasn't being used, which is good because it wasn't particularly, didn't feel particularly confident about staying on it. The toilet facilities much improved, and then the gaming area is, they lowered the ceiling a bit, put good lighting in there, which is key. I think particularly, it's a whitish light rather than a yellowish light as well. So when you're looking at models, that helps a lot. Oh
yeah, lighting's a massive. You see offices when they change the lighting over, it just makes the whole place completely different.
Absolutely, even just straining your eyes looking at dice, sometimes you get that corner of a hall which isn't particularly well lit. So that helps, and then their shop, which is a decent size. Obviously, they use storage elsewhere for the internet side of things. But what it means is, as I said, I ordered stuff on the Friday because it was coming out, wanting a 5% discount, that kind of thing, and walk in on the Saturday, during the afternoon, and boom, there it is. Thank you very much. And if you need anything, they can run down and get it. So that's cool. There was always staff around, a well-stocked bar, decent prices. Really, really quite good. Little seating area just off the gaming area as well for hanging out, particularly useful for setting up lunch, naturally. So that was all kind of taken in, and one end of the whole hall has just loads of scenery. So I walked in, and Tim, the events manager there, was like, right, well, these are your tables I've set up for you. Go and pick some mats out to use for your gaming, and then we'll just chuck scenery down. It's like, cool. And it actually got to the point, and I was Saturday, I was like, if you want some more scenery, just go and grab some. Make sure the tables are suitable for what you want to play.
Cool. So it was quite easy to change things around.
Yeah, I do think that if you filled it out, scenery might be a little bit sparse, but I think that's the same with almost all of these large places. Scenery takes a lot of space. That's the key to keep it in a decent condition, particularly. And these were all on shelves, packed in, but still, we could have I was trying to keep it matching, so that's why I limited it and allowed people to add to it. But if you had, however many gamers they have in there, they've actually got another, so that's their main hall. They've actually got another hall for opening up for larger events, but not as good as their main hall, naturally. But, I haven't been to an event in a venue like that where if you max it out, you aren't struggling for terrain.
Yeah, I think that's true to say for most things, isn't it, really?
Yeah, the problem is it costs money to do it. It doesn't earn you money, You've already got the tables and everything else, which, they do earn you money, but they cost a lot, and the money they earn you is not huge kind of thing, if you can get by with what you've got. So
yes, yeah.
It's one of those things that probably will get even better. And with all that, it was good terrain, I had no problems with it, and there was a nice mix. If you've seen the photos, and I tried to just grab some different stuff to throw down and give a bit of a different look.
They had a variety then. It wasn't all like, say, a load of MDF stuff that all looked very...
No, there was some of that. There was some, very, very Infinity terrain. There was, Citadel Woods. There was, foam rocks, and then there was 40k buildings. There was some other buildings. There was a lot of different stuff to choose from. Of course, they play a lot of different games. On the second day there was a Hobbit event going alongside ours as well, 1 day Hobbit event. And they have Hordes and War Machine, don't need much terrain for that. 40k, you name it, they'll put an event on there if they have to. So, yeah, that was quite cool. And of course, Friday night, I had the Friday Night Magic players in, keeping the store running, spending all their money on cards.
Yes.
But it was really nice as an event runner. There's, halfway up the hall, there's a little desk unit which you can sit behind with the screens around the room, 4, I think. So had Tom helping me out again, and he was throwing up the scenario information on the screens. So during each game, we could have the scenario playing. Quite often, there was a TV above where we were, and Dan Evans particularly just kind of kept staring above our head, and I'm like, what? Oh yeah, there's a screen up there, and he obviously, like most people there, didn't bring their own scenario pack, so we're relying on those.
No one ever does that.
No, even when they're asked to. But no, that's fine. We've got those TVs there. It means that if you're playing a scenario, particularly when we were throwing a rule in, actually, that was when it could become really useful. So most people were looking for, near the end of the game, for what counted for scoring. Scoring rules we were using that game. But also, there was almost every game had a special rule that was made up. And again, most of them are from the black books or bastardized versions thereof. But put them up, and it's like, oh, I thought it worked like this. No, it works like that. Well, it's up there, So if it's written clearly enough, they can understand it, which is cool. And, deployment maps, all those kind of little things. It does help to have them. It was just cycling through them. And Tom's good at doing that kind of thing. And by the third game or whatever, it was like, okay, well, the first bit's not so important, so we'll loop that bit quicker and then hold a little bit longer on the actual information. And stuff like that. And that really helps. And, Firestorm's got it as well, but it's good to have something like that. And at independent events, that's something that's, requires more effort and therefore doesn't always get done.
Yeah, I've always thought actually that, good display TV things where you can put things up, it's got to make life a hell of a lot easier for when you're trying to, tell people they've got to go, who they're playing, scenarios, what the rules are, and if you've got someone there that's, good on a laptop, it's a great way of letting everyone know what's going on.
Yeah, and to be honest, it could be utilised even more. I'm fully aware that we use it for that and it's useful, but actually, I think it's one of those things, it's a really great use of that equipment. Well, is it? Or is that the most basic use of that equipment you can have? It's fundamentals, like the basics are covered really well, but actually, you could throw even more information up there and utilise that in a different way. So something that maybe for the next events where we've got those facilities, we'll have to look at. And it's something like Blood and Glory. The problem is, how many people have you got? What kind of space are you taking up? How many TVs do you need? Because again, as I say, an independent event, if you have to carry 4 TVs up to cover a large space, that's a lot of hassle and risk of damaging it and just getting 4 TVs, So if it's a 30-man event and you only need 2 flat screen TVs, now don't take up much room, there's potential for me to do that. I know enough people with a spare TV that could lend me one for a weekend, and I've got a spare one in the bedroom. Definitely. Especially now we've got the iPads out, How many times we don't actually watch the TV in bed because we've got the iPad out and I'm watching something like downloaded or through whatever. So, yeah, there's potential to use that better, which is kind of cool, but we have to kind of sit and think about exactly what you do, because there's also potential to make it not work by putting up too much information. Because
then you've got different connectivity and you're making sure that it, see it.
Yeah, all that, but also putting up too much information or the wrong information or just confusing information. So, yeah, there's a lot to think about in that, and we'll have to kind of do that moving forwards. So yeah, we had 18 players, a good mix, had to swap a couple of people over, as you do. In fact, 2 people, which actually I think most events has been 1 or 2 people, so it's not bad. There tends to be a fairly good balance of traitors and loyalists. And there were some easy swaps to make as well, which was really cool. Having looked at the list, we got a lot of glaives, which was always fun. It was interesting to see less special characters this time, whether that's just because out of those 18 it's a smaller sample size, or whether they thought other people might be bringing them and didn't want the penalties of having characters die or what have you. So that's something that, if it is affecting people bringing characters, I don't mind to a point, but maybe we relax it a little bit if they don't, until people start bringing them again, and just kind of play it by ear as to what's going on.
I suppose if you've been to one of your events previously and you had a Primarch, and then that Primarch by the second game was absolutely useless because 3 other of the same Primarch had died in the first game, then you might think, well, I'm not going to take him again.
Yep, you absolutely might do. On the same instance, if I start seeing the same super heavies turn up in every list, that to me doesn't seem as fun. So maybe you do something to kind of do that. And I think that would just roll and change. And I kind of don't mind influencing people's army selection, because it doesn't stop you from, say, you think that your Primarch might be a popular one, Vulcan maybe, or Horus particularly, but that's all you got painted. Well, you can still bring him, and you're still going to get to use him. And the chances are most of the Primarchs don't tend to really take those big hits. Kurz was the only one that really got hit. So, it doesn't stop you bringing a Primarch, but some people might choose not to, and that's fine by me. But it's something that over all my events I'm going to monitor, I think, and monitor kind of super heavies that are used as well, because the last thing you want is people bringing the same kind of lists every time. And I don't think it's a major issue with the Heresy. I think we looked at people who came to this event who've been to others, like Ben and Dan. They were bringing a different list to what they brought before. There might be a solid basis of the same list, but then, people are only ever going to buy so many tactical marines, or once you've got your troops sorted, you might not play around with that too much. But
yeah, and I think it's fair to say that most people's armies are not going to be throwing away. I've done that army now for one tournament, I'm now going to do a whole new army.
Yeah, exactly.
And completely rewrite it.
Yeah. So, and you never know, some of those people, it might have encouraged them to paint something else up to bring along. But it also, potentially, it can, moving forwards, if we do then do something against super heavy tanks, then people might come prepared to take on super heavy tanks, and all of a sudden those units like the Sakaran Venator, if it hasn't got the big target to aim at with its gun, is it as effective?
Yes.
So, it can play with other things as well. So maybe you can just kind of break a meta that might exist, might not exist. I say that's all a data kind of thing that you just have to keep an eye on, I think. And I mean, with Blood and Glory, it's going to be 2,500 points anyway. So that's the first time I've run a 2,500 point one since Taken Reaver, I think. So that's going to mix things up a little bit just based on that aspect.
Yes, yeah, it makes a difference, doesn't it? The point limit.
Yeah, definitely. Some people are just going to be, I'm not going to bring that, or I can't afford to bring that super heavy the way I want to. So it can change things. It certainly can change things, which I think's cool. Cool. So this is, as I said, this is the first of the Malrain system kind of fights. We had the planet of Galvern, and the loyalists and traitors are rushing in to try and fight for this system, which is close enough to their kind of the obvious routes to terror. The Horus, the War Master, needs his resources to go and fight this war. Now it's become a protracted war, and the Imperium needs to stop him getting these, but also needs them themselves. So the Malrain system, there's going to be more information out about it soon as I really codify. I've written up a fair amount. It just needs to be kind of put out there. It's got 11 planets on it. It's got everything you need. It's a handy system. They've got like the Prometheum, they've got the metals, they've got the people, they've got the agri world. It's one of those perfect little systems that you can play over. Almost like it's designed that way. And the first mission was, these forces are meeting outside of the city. The city itself of Palinor, it was the cults within that rose up and was in a state of civil war. There were aerial defences, and no one was too sure who was really in charge of them. So these two groups landed out, safely outside of the city, and then we're going to try and push in. And we saw, a fairly standard. I chose a fairly standard, nice mission to get everyone in nice and early, and saw a massive loyalist win, and I mean massive. It was like, all right, okay, and it's become a bit of a joke that loyalists win everything at all my events.
Yes. Actually, I think wasn't
London Heresy. I think I think they won 4 out of 5 at London Heresy, and did pretty well in the one before that as well. And immediately, alongside just seeing the lists and then kind of seeing them played, there were 1 or 2 lists that had potential to be a bit kind of difficult to deal with, and already signalled them out. So Chris Gent bought a Thunderhawk, which by itself is not a major issue, to be fair. The Thunderhawk is...
Yeah, the Thunderhawks are never that scary or super heavy, I don't think.
No. The fact it drops off a shed load of Terminators and it's hard to stop them getting there, that is decent, but still not necessarily the be-all and end-all. And it was Dark Angels alongside a Ravenwing bike army. And Chris is a serious player. He's a good guy, but he plays with slightly more of an edge than a lot of people. So you can often see the coward wing hugging the backboard edge, waiting for the Thunderhawk to turn up. And jet bikes are hard to take down when they're jinking, just trying to stay alive. The fact they can move off the board and come back on the board makes them very... Ravenwing Rite of War is a particularly strong Rite of War if you build into it. So it became apparent that was a list that could cause problems. There were a couple of bad scenarios potentially for it, but you can kind of game them a little bit to help out. So there was one we picked up. One I probably missed out a little bit was Ben's Mechanicum, which was just one of those solid Mechanicum lists which I suppose if I'd really broken down and looked at it, I might have seen that actually it's a strong list. But
Mechanicum can be like that, though.
Yeah.
I think sometimes Mechanicum can be massively powerful, and sometimes it doesn't look that way.
And I also haven't, I also haven't really played too much against the Pelasts and all that, and I know they're good, but I haven't looked fully into it. And so I think, and also Ben's a good player. So you add all that together. It does count a lot.
Yeah, a list can look very mediocre, but then in the hands of a good player, suddenly every one of those little rules that you think, well, that's not a bad rule, becomes really, really good.
Yeah, Will Henry's Salamander's another one. He's got tanks go up the guts and spin out some Terminators or whatever. I think that was the one he was using. And again, he's a good player. And I'm looking at the list going, well, the list isn't that bad. There's a Spartan, and it does this and there's this. But if you can do this, but actually if a player doesn't let you get away with doing those things, it becomes more difficult. And I do wonder sometimes if, we had some players there of a mixed kind of experience level as well. Giles was up playing from my local club, playing his first ever event. He's got his Heresy army ready over the last however many months, basically from Betrayal at Calth, probably a bit afterwards. So, he's turning up fully expecting to lose most of his games, that kind of thing. And a good general with a decent army is going to, he's going to have to pull out something to beat that. So those things are going to happen anyway. I'll try it with a couple of Armoured Company lists, which again can be very, very tough, but actually they're not played by people who are going all out, which helps. Graham and Max, I'm not saying they're bad players or anything, but they don't play.
They're not playing in a means of I want to maximise. Because you can play in different ways, can't you? You can play the way of I'm going to have a bit of fun, and ways I'm really going to play hard. Yeah,
Chris with his jet bikes, if there was a chance of him losing them, won't put them in that opportunity. Whereas actually, I would, if Graham might be cautious with his tanks, but wouldn't purposely do something like and move them. He wouldn't. I don't think Graham would be the kind of guy to go, actually, you know what? It's not worth even getting in shooting range this turn, right? Because that wouldn't seem right to him. So he would go, okay, it's a bit of a risk, and he might not go full bore with it. He might be cautious, but he will still take the opportunity to engage. Where if that was a tournament, you would say, well, actually, the best move is to just run away.
Yes.
There's that kind of slightly different approach to the game is all it is. And we actually got to, second scenario, started to put in a couple of fun rules, and the loyalists smash face again. I won't get into the scenarios too much. They were black book scenarios. They were the basic five out of the 6 scenarios you get from the rule book now, with fixed deployments chose for them. And I say 1 or 2 odd rules. We had, in fact, you can go and listen to Edge of Empire to find Graham's kind of review of the weekend. But what did we have? We had, so one was having seen some of the tank armies and some of the vehicle things. I wanted people not to just sit their tanks in one place. So as the traitors got pushed back towards the walls of the city, I think it might be the 3rd game, 4th game, I can't remember exactly which. I had this kind of mud built up outside the city, and if you didn't keep moving, you would get slowed by the mud. It was become a thingy effect, and then the automated defences on the walls would fire upon you. So if your tanks didn't move at over a certain speed, then on a 3+, you take a glancing hit. Which is harsh for some armies, but cool, whatever. It's a narrative event.
Exactly,
I'm
but
not that bothered.
They're the fun ones, really, because then suddenly there's a different dynamic to your play, isn't there?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't just sit back here and do this. I've got to move.
Yeah, I think Graham got unlucky in that one, in that he was playing one of the Mechanicum armies and had to move into that mid-range where Mechanicum are really good. And it's like, that's a bad matchup for that kind of thing. Had he been playing someone else, it wouldn't have hurt him as much. And we had one where the kind of the dogfighters had arrived, so the air forces had come to fight over the battlefield and offer their assistance, and anything arriving from reserve would take hits based on coming into play, things like that, to try and discourage maybe some of the lists that were utilising the reserves and ongoing reserves rules in that respect. Yeah. Whether it completely worked or not, it made some armies choose to put stuff on the table that would normally go into reserve. So in that respect, yes, it did. That gives if you're deploying something on the table which you normally want to keep off, you normally want to keep that off to keep it alive. So you're giving the opportunity for their opponent to be able to kill that where normally they might not have that. So, there was a bit of a dynamic shift in that, which was cool. I don't necessarily think it worked fully for what we wanted to do, but it certainly provided some consternation from some of the players. Oh my goodness. We didn't have too many games really finish very early, which is good. Every now and then you'll get a game that really is over quite quickly, but there weren't too many.
Yeah, they're the ones that that something's gone quite horribly.
Well, I mean, again, but though sometimes it can be someone going, "Yeah, I'm going to put everything in reserve," and not realising their opponent could obliterate what forces they leave on there, and then just as they drop in reserve in piecemeal, just destroy it very quickly. So you can have those kind of things, but we didn't really have any of that. We had some tough matchups, some people, again cursing their dice, walking around the table. Well, it would have been all right had this tank been able to do anything, or it got to this roll where if I could stop this unit, this tank from doing what it wanted to do, I had a chance of winning. And that's important to remember as well, because Chris, he had to leave early. He won his 4 games. And I'll pick on Chris because I don't think he minds. He had a list which worked well. But his cool list, it fits the law, it fits the right of war, it looks good as well, and he had particularly one game, he got drawn up against an Alpha Legion all drop list army. And essentially it almost came down to whoever won the choice for going first would give it to their opponent and not seize. So that for one turn, not a huge amount could happen.
Right, yes, I'm with you, yeah.
And so, and Chris won that role to give it to Dan. And so not only did Dan's first turn end up with him just putting down targets, but it also meant that Chris has the last turn, which he wants, to freely move in to take objectives. You know, so they're big. That's a big thing with an army, particularly that can come on and off the table so easily as his. And had that gone the other way, yeah, Chris wouldn't have won that game, probably. You never know what happens, but it was one of those games. And there are times when something shoots at that big tank, and you're like, okay, this is my big weapon, and it just completely fails you, even though you've got the flank shot and everything else. So you can't just judge what the results are either. You've got to have a look at what's happened in that game to make that go that way. So yeah, that was good. But essentially, the loyalists pushed the traitors back, and it's hard with the narrative sometimes because it can be easy to jump ahead too far. So it's like, okay, so they push them back and then they push on forwards, and then the traitors get pushed back some more because they lost the second round fairly convincingly. I was like, okay, well, and now here they, trying to counter-attack. And then they got pushed back again because the Loyalists won the third game as well. And then the fourth game, they won it, and their VP's total, because I make a note of that as well, was like the win, was it? Yeah, they'd won by one metric, like a decent amount, and by the second metric, they'd smashed them. And it was like, oh, wow, that kind of thing happened all the way to the final game where they smashed them again. It was just really, really strange. And I don't know why. I don't know whether it was the list on the Loyalist side. I think there were 3 lists on the Loyalist side that were very good, and maybe I missed a couple of them a little bit. Mind you, I did my bit to help because I had to jump in as spare player on the last game and got royally smashed. Then there was a game where, Mechanicum are tough to take down. Well, not when I'd written a list which had a lot of 4-up armour saves, and Max has all the autocannons in the world.
Oh,
and heavy bolters, and it's the game only went to turn 5 or 6 or whichever one we finished on by virtue of the fact that when his Leviathan drop pod came down, I immobilised his Leviathan. Otherwise he would have ruined me a whole couple of turns earlier, I'm sure. But it was one of those games where it was like, oh, you've got long-range, high-strength AP4 guns, have you? Okay, well, this will be fun. And that happens. It just happens. It's very rare that happens to Mechanicum, but it's cool. So I did my bit there for the traitors, giving them a nice, easy win. I gave them a very nice, easy win, which was quite good because the game was over fairly quick and I could crack on. Well, not too quick, but... and it was interesting across the board to see, glaives going down. They're good tanks, but they're not the be all and end all that a lot of people sometimes think they can be.
I've never been that worried about glaives. Actually, whenever I've come up against a glaive, I've never worried about it as much.
No, you've had an army full of tanks.
Yeah, and I've had army with usually some real heavy hitting.
Yeah.
Terminators with chain fists, you just think, okay, bring it on. I'm just going to get in combat with that thing and it's going to melt.
Mechanicum don't mind them too much because they haven't got the huge amount of models. They're high toughness, they're multi-wound. It's not as big a deal, but they can ruin, if someone's bought like their couple of Betrayal at Cal sets and what have you, it can be be a problem, And it wasn't just glaives, there were other cool tanks going on there as well. And some cool lists, some really nice, like there's a whole Mechanicum Thalax force was really nice to see. And like Chris Steele, who I met at Warhammer World first actually, he bought a Solar Auxilia with the little explosive tank drone things. I can't remember what they're called now, Cyclops. The little mini tank units which go forward and explode. Which it's like, oh, I haven't actually read the rules on them. And then all of a sudden, every game, the people come back, well, man, those things, they're just exploding everywhere. It was just like, I couldn't deal with them. And I think that was something that people don't see. So, it was Solar Auxilia. So he had his defense line to hide behind as his standard.
Yes.
But he brought something different within that as well, which was cool. We only had a couple of knights, which was quite funny because Dave Simpson, bless him, had a couple of knights and a Typhon in a 3,000 point list, and was moaning about someone else's army choice. I think he was moaning about the amount of glaives or something like that, or coming up with suggestions to nerf them a little bit. And I was like, you know what? I don't think you need to worry about them. But again, it's perception, isn't it? People have perceptions of what.
Yeah, certain people find certain units really difficult to deal with. Often that can be what type of army you're running as well.
Absolutely.
You have a certain type of army and you always play your mate and he's got a glaive and it always rips you apart. You see in a glaive, you go, oh no, not another glaive. But someone who takes glaives out every,
I don't even think
every other game, they'll be like, oh yeah, bring it on.
I don't even think Dave was not necessarily that worried. I think it just the fact there were 3 or 4 of them or whatever, maybe he thought of some way of countering that a little bit within special rules. But yeah, that's cool. Whatever. I'll always take that kind of information on board. I might then throw it away if I don't agree with it, but it's always a good thing to have people's opinions and input like that, because it makes you think a little bit about where they're coming from with what they're doing as well. But from what I can see, everyone had good fun. And in fact, so we're recording this after Graham recorded his bit for Edge of Empire. So you can go and listen to that on the latest episode if you want. And he said it was great fun, relaxed atmosphere. That was very much what I got from where I was. I had a couple of people asking some rules. I was like, yeah, I don't think you can do that. I think that's kind of against kind of what they meant when you wrote it. But you always get 1 or 2 questions like that. And sometimes it's asked deadpan because they honestly just think it's played that way. And sometimes when you say no, they kind of smile wryly and like, oh, well, you always get a little bit.
Am I going to get away with this?
Yeah, sometimes.
No, I'm not.
yeah. In this bit. So yeah, that was, that's all part of the fun of it. Everyone kind of got into the whole, it was a limited narrative on this one. It was in that respect, but it didn't have to be extensive, if you know what I mean. It was fairly cool to keep that going. And I tried to keep this one a little bit simpler, which I don't think people minded. Again, just keeping an eye on what we're going to do moving forwards, trying different things. Because something I might need to do down the line is really differentiate, actually break away from a pattern that maybe comes too set. Something that could be key with more events coming out, particularly. But yeah, and we had a couple of armies that were more basic, but the rest of the armies were really good. There was it's always good to travel and see different people's armies. So there was Dominic's Dark Angels up there, which, I've never met Dom before. Lovely army. Nice guy. Really good to see that. I've seen Will's army before. I've seen Dave's army. Those guys, Chris's armies, but again, there were other people. There was another Dark Angels army up there, which had some awesome bits in it. The army overall was good, but there were some particular bits that stood out a lot out of that army. That was always good to see. And an 18-person event still smashing it out. Everyone who was walking in was coming and having a look down at the toys, as they always do. Some of them know 30k, some of them don't. But it was good to see. Good.
What was the standard of the armies like? Were all the armies well painted?
So there was.
Did you have anyone turn up and you thought,
Ironically, Max from the Road to Terror will tell you that his isn't finished, and it isn't. It was all right to play against when he wanted to set them up for the photos, which I still haven't put online. Actually, I must do that. he actually asked to remove like a couple of models. And I was like, okay, he'll remove that drop pod. You know, it's got like levels of shading of silver on it, and it's not finished. And then he removed some other models as well, and I was like, whoa, it's like half your army, because obviously some of it's finished and some of it isn't. But yeah, his conversion work for his Leviathan was really cool, and other stuff like that as well. So you know, he's working on through an army, and that's fine. You know, it's cool. I'm not got a problem with that. Ideally, I'd want him to come next time with a fully painted, finished army. But when you've only got 18 players, it's chilled out. It's cool.
Yeah, and also, you know, if he was trying to get that done, and you know,
yeah,
frantically trying to get it finished, you know, you got to feel the guy.
And yeah, and I'm only pulling him out because you know he's Max and he's got his own podcast and it deserves to happen. And Phil would approve of it. You know, Giles came up from our club and he worked feverishly the night before coming up to get his stuff painted, and it looked good. It looked good. It wasn't. He'll be the first to admit it's not going to win against a lot of the armies there, but it looked good on the table. And you know, a full army painted cohesively, not even just painting between the lines, right? But having an army on the table all painted the same way, where you've done the detail, looks good. There were armies that were better than others, and there was some really cool stuff. Chris's army, we saw at London Heresy, which was really cool. Will's army, I think, got commissioned or was a mate painted that, was really cool. And you can see, you know, put videos up and one of the guys put a video up on the Facebook group as well, showing his little view round of the armies. There was some cool stuff. Phil's army. In fact, Phil won. I think he won the best army, did he? Yeah, he actually won the player voted best painted, which was really cool, which was Sons of Horus army, was quite gritty, dirty going on, which was really nice. So I've never seen that before because he's, you know, from up that way. And we gave the judge voted one to Dominic's Dark Angels, which again it's quite different. So Phil used a lot of techniques, weathering and all that, and there was a lot of different bits he'd put into his Sons of Horus, whereas Dominic's were like the kind of style of painting that I would paint, but just executed well. So it was, you know, some edge highlights, and you know, you could see him painting on the checkers and things like that. But it was just done well, and I think that's easy to sometimes for people to look over.
Yes, yeah, because some people look down on certain techniques or styles and say, "Oh, he's just done this." But if you execute it well,
yeah,
that is actually a lot harder than people might give you credit for.
And it was clean, so it didn't. It stands out that little bit because, again, we've talked so many times about how much weathering there goes on in the Heresy. It was clean, you know, edge highlights, but just done crisply. And there were certain parts of it which were done better, which looked very good, because I think he won best squad as well, or character, one of the two. So,
okay.
Yeah, there was, you know, that was really good to see. In fact, we could give a quick rundown. So, the Emperor's Champ so this is a loyalist player that's kind of done whatever to become like the most valued. Was Toby Firth. He'd moved from his traitor side over to the loyalists, from his World Eaters to the Raven Guard, a very different army. Was still in his early stages of using them, and got some quite tricky matchups as well, but just took everything as it came and played, and you know, people enjoy playing him as well, which is always a key thing, I think, at events. So he won that. The Despoiler is the same award for the traitors, and that was given to Dan White, Alpha Legion drop army, who randomly got drawn against one of the worst matchups he could get. I'm trying to remember who it was now. I think it was the Mechanicum with all the Ben's Mechanicum with a load of Interceptor and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, I was going to try and avoid putting you two together. And he went, no, it's cool, it's fine. I'll just have to try something different. I ended up losing that game. But again, he was like, yeah, I'm up for taking on the hard list, and okay, I've got this, and it's not a good matchup, but I'll take it. So that always helps. You got someone like that at your event, you know that you can just go, actually, I kind of don't want to do this to anyone, but Dan, do you mind taking it on? And he's the kind of guy who'll be like, yep, that's cool. So that having people like that at an event are really good. Really good.
And I think it's good when you can do that because you can make everyone's games a lot more fun.
Yeah, Joe's quite good for that. He's quite happy to take on anything. So, it does help. And Dan's a great guy with it as well, which, again, is always good. The best sports was actually given to Dan. So he got that on top of all that. Maybe it's because he did smile through all those things, but he's a good bloke to play against, which helps. The historiographer, the kind of best narrative event. So at London Heresy, his Lehman Russ managed to run into Angron and do absolutely no wounds with his 8 million attacks, and Russ died every game, just got mullered. I think in this event it was unit of Deathsworn throwing their grenade in a last ditch kind of thing, and then having it scatter back and kill the whole squad that had thrown them. Something happens to Dan Evans where these things kind of happen. And there were a couple of other ones actually. There was a couple of really good, well-written pieces. But Dan, bless Dan, he made me laugh with that one. Best voted player armies was Phil. And this was, quite a few armies got a vote, which is good as well. And in fact, for sports, I think most people got a sports vote as well, which is good to see. As I say, the judged best army was Dominic for doing that clean look. For the artisan, so the individual character, individual unit, and vehicle. I actually put these up. Tom and I are both not top-level painters, that's fair to say. I can judge what I like, and I can judge to a certain point. So what I actually did with these was put them up on Facebook and Twitter and ask people to kind of tell me what they thought was the best. You're working off photos and stuff like this, so it was just an indication of maybe what we should be looking at. And I thought that was quite fun, actually. Because it's really interesting to see all the reasons why people are voting. So, like, the Thunderhawk got a lot of votes because it was a Thunderhawk and because it was Dark Angels. Not necessarily based on its paint job, which is always going to happen to a point. And that's why, we talked about Crystal Brush and how easy it is to influence a vote. Like, that's not really, that's not malicious intervening, but it does happen. But we kind of narrowed it down, and then we had a look at them. So the artisan, so the individual character, was Dave Simpson's Death Guard, which his whole army's pretty nice, actually. Personally, I think he used too much mud on the tracks of his vehicles. There's a couple of them that are, it's almost like, it's probably realistic where they are caked in it. But for me, it just doesn't look quite right. It's well done, but it doesn't look quite right. And so his army has some of that and then some without it. I think they look better without it. But what it showed, the character showed the best of what he did. There were a couple up there that it could have been, but that looked very good. So Dave won that. The vehicle. So this was, Dave actually had one of the two. There were two talked about online for this, and it was one of Dave's Death Guard tanks. The one, I think it might have been a Spartan without, it might have been the Typhon, I can't remember, whichever one it was. That wasn't, the tracks were only done to a certain point, but there's a lot of weathering, it's really nice. And the Thunderhawk. And, the Thunderhawk, Chris paints well. You've seen Chris's painting for his jet bikes and stuff. It's that same style carried over to a Thunderhawk. And it is imposing, and there were some cool tanks there, but, Chris does that well, that style well. And everyone was liking it, so he got that for the Thunderhawk. And then the Artificer. So this was the best unit, and that was Dominic's command squad. I think the Dark Angels. So again, where we said his painting was good across the lot, this unit was even better with some nice touches in there as well. It was very good, very good. And you can see all those pictures on the Facebook page or the event page, one of the two. And then the award given for coolest army was given to Chris Steele for bringing a solo auxiliary list where he had he had a Malcador Infernus and that, but he didn't go over the top with those. And then, as I say, he brought those little demolition tanks, which just blew people's minds. And it was the one thing where it was like, well, that's different. Where every other list was variations on themes, but it was really cool to see him bringing out stuff. I think they did okay. I don't know how he did over the whole event, if they were absolutely slaughtering people, but I just love the fact that they're flying towards people and they're like, I've got to kill it. I have to kill it now or try and avoid it. They're just flying out the line, which is really cool. Really cool. And Element gave us some vouchers as well for giving away in those. So people got some vouchers from Element. So massive thank you to them. And they also gave quite ironically, Tim said, what's your big prize? And I said, well, it's usually the sports, to be honest. And so the winner of the best sporting at First Blood, a narrative event, got a ticket to the Element Games Grand Slam, the Heresy event, which is their actual tournament, bring it event. But
really?
I think, but I think Dan was well up for that, and I think he's going to go along and maybe drag a couple of guys up from London as well. It's late November, so I don't think I'm going to be able to go. November's a busy month for me now. But he got a ticket for that, so that's really awesome from Element as well to announce that. And you can find details out on Element's Facebook page for that, or buy tickets on their website as well. I can't remember exactly what it's called now, but it's the Horus Heresy something at the end of November, and it's a tournament. It's cool for those people who play harder games of Heresy. Actually, it could be really good fun. Go and test your metal against other people, or just go along and have a laugh.
Some people want. That's what some people.
Yeah, we've said it. We've said it. Take the gloves off. It's every now and then. I like doing it. Every now and then it's like, actually, right, let's see what we can do with this list. And give it a go and see how good you think you are. Or, as I say, although it's a tournament, you can still go along and have fun. And if you lose a couple of games, you go to the bottom tables where no one's going to win the event, so everyone's quite happy. Just to chill a bit more, And even at the top end, Ben Greaves will say he won all of his games at that Throne of Skulls I went to and got sports votes from all bar one of his players. Just because someone smashes face doesn't mean they're not fun to play against or a nice guy. So that's cool. So going into Blood and Glory, we've got Galvern. Palanor City has now been kind of taken over by the loyalists, and they're quelling the uprising that happened there. But there are more ships incoming and a lot more planets, or a lot of that planet to fight for. So we'll have to see exactly where that goes with First Blood. But it was really interesting. It was great bunch of guys. They all seemed to enjoy it. Said thank you for it. The lunches were Subway lunches that Element get in as an event organizer. I paid them money. They sorted it out. A selection of a Subway with crisps there. The venue's open late night on the Saturday. We only had a handful of people there. We have access to, we had our music playing out because we had the computer still plugged into all the screens, and we chilled out. Would have been great to have a few more people there. We could have played some games and stuff, but you can get takeaway in, and we chilled out, talked, which was great again. I really love that about events, getting 5, 6, 8 people sat round and talking about, whether you're talking about heresy or gaming or something else. You get to know people, and that's the best part of the events, really. Going away for a week.
Yeah, it's meeting people, chatting about your hobby as well, isn't it?
I've made some of the people I talk to the most. I met them through events, and people I value opinions of, and actually ideas spool from that kind of stuff as well. And it's good fun. It is good fun, and the venue stays open. There, they got the bar, which is reasonably priced. A fair selection. Everyone seemed to be enjoying that aspect of it, and you can still just go and wander around the shop and spend loads of money, like Tom did while he was in the downtime, was putting together some Thousand Suns and some Blood Bowl and various other bits and pieces, which is always good to see. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it appears that the people who came really enjoyed it. I know a few of them are looking to get to Blood and Glory if they can. Not everyone can make it, obviously. So who knows? Next year might go back up there. Might have to look at what's going on. The Heresy calendar might be busy next year. And I've got to look at what I'm doing and where and when and how and why. So, but yeah, anything you thinking about asking questions about the event or?
Well, no, not really. I mean, for me, I just love looking at the armies. I love seeing what people have done, and if that's up to a high standard, I think that makes a great event. So, by the sounds of it, it sounds like it looks great. Everyone had a good time, and that's all you can really ask, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame I had to play that last game because that's when I was going to put a load of pictures up, and then I've been doing so much since, but. That's something I want to get a little bit better at, is going around the event, showing off little bits and pieces. Did a little short video of showing people at the event, but getting a bit more of that online would be really cool. So that's something that potentially we're going to have to look at. And again, sometimes that's dependent on the venue and what you've got going on, because certainly at London Heresy it was a noisy hall with a lot going on. So it's harder to do, but
yes, completely.
Who knows? So yeah, I mean that's First Blood. It's, as an organizer looking at it, I'm obviously not going to get into the games, so maybe people have got kind of an idea of whether that was any good or not. What we've just said, whether it's useful to you. Certainly, as an organizer in this one, having chilled out, cool players. Yeah, you're always going to be chasing one or two players to finish their games on time if you're going for this style of event, which I like for what I was setting up. I like having a fixed amount of games and everything else. I think if you've got a more enclosed venue and maybe not a shop, that you can be a bit more, if you've got an independent venue can be open later or what have you, then you can play around with different things. But for this, I think the locals might have to be home to see their significant others and things like that. Then the timescale is not a bad thing. Every event has its, every choice has its bonuses and negatives in that respect. But it was good. It's good working with Tom as well. He helps a lot because he takes any of that. He can handle the computer issues that I can't. So that stress goes. That just disappears. And he's talking about playing in Blood and Glory, and all he needs to do is make sure that his results are ready to go, so he can come along and input and probably handle that as well as play the game, which would be really cool for him, because then he gets both, best of both worlds really. So yeah, it's going to be good.
Yeah, excellent. Sounds good.
Cool. All right, we'll leave that there. We'll come and close out the show. Well, that's another show. Do forgive us if we've had some sound issues. We've had high winds recording this. I don't know if Neil's noticed, but definitely noticed my end through the Skype. And we've also had the council deciding to dig up the road outside my flat late night. So I'm going to try and take that all out and clean it all up, but it may not have happened. So apologies for that if it has. There were a few things we missed in the news. So do you want to talk about the stuff that's only just come out, Neil? The announcement?
Which one's that then, Greg?
The one...
Oh, yes. So on the night of recording this, they've spoke about Apple have released their new set of iPhones. And obviously, as part of their showing off, they were showing off a bit of 40k game action. and a bit of augmented reality with the Freeblade game, I believe. And it's good to see that they're obviously still developing things and that they're getting that sort of airtime. It's always quite great to see GW stuff in the sort of more mainstream media and the mainstream consciousness, as it were.
Yeah, definitely.
Makes it all more real.
Yeah. So Freeblade was chosen when Apple first brought in the touch sensitivity screen. So the one you could press down on or lightly or what have you. And they utilised Freeblade, which had been obviously one of the first games to play with that kind of stuff, to show off that feature on one of their keynotes. And obviously they've got a good working relationship with those people, so they've gone back to them again. And it's a cool Freeblades are cool. Knights are cool. It looks cool, and it appears that you can play this in an augmented reality way, which is basically augmented reality. For those who aren't aware, is your game, fake reality imposed over real reality, as it were. So it's featured. It's locked into a point in the real world, so that if you move around with your camera, your phone acts as a camera, should I say, that would move around it as if it were there, which is really cool and probably the future of computer gaming, and has real potential things for wargaming as well to utilise. Obviously, you won't be painting miniatures if you're doing it via computer, but there are ways to sell and utilise that kind of environment to play games, and some people are very happy to play games like Warhammer just on the computer, but it'll be interesting to see how that comes through. We might see other game companies try and utilise overlapping that kind of stuff, like Exilis did, which was a game that was you moved around on a map and then allowed the computer to make all the rolls, decide all the things, but it had painted miniatures. And there was another one which had tiles, and you had a pen which scanned the monsters as you moved them. So you could scan a monster, scan where you were moving it, and then the computer would activate all the terrain bonuses and what have you. Can't remember what that game was called, but I think they stopped selling as well. It'll be a hard market to get into that breaches both miniatures and computers. I was saying to you, I think my first thought was for D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, role-playing games generally, it can give you a limitless play scope on which you can then have your battles played out, where that just provides a little bit more, in addition to theatre of the mind. With wargaming, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if you're
wargaming. For me, one of the big parts is the models, painting them, collecting them.
But there doesn't necessarily
doing away with that. Change.
Yeah. I mean, you could have augmented reality battlefields upon which you put your painted models. So you could have terrain features because. And again, I mean, I don't know if this will work. It's just one of those things where until you try it, you don't know. But you could have a 6-foot area set up for your augmented reality, which could then superimpose all your terrain. So when you play the game, all the time you're looking through your screen, you're seeing an ice planet with ice walls and all this kind of stuff that you might not be able to do. You could have 100 different, terrain layouts. But unfortunately, if someone's looking at a game without your screen, all they're seeing is a blank table with some miniatures on there. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure there's going to be quite a few game companies looking into how they can utilise it. Maybe it's something like Privateer Press might get a little bit more out of that, War Machine, where some people complain that War Machine is basically you take all the terrain off the table anyway. To clear it so you can play the game. I'm sure there are people out there who disagree with that, but that is something I've heard much more than once. The other things it can do is it can very easily give you kind of ranges, stuff like that. So you can overlay your miniature game. You can go, right, everyone within 12 inches can do this. Boom, there's a 12-inch bubble. all these units can do this. So there's a lot of ways they can look at utilising this kind of technology, and it'll be interesting to see how they do, if they do, what comes of it. Because at the end of the day, as I say, board games have moved online a lot recently onto iPad, particularly, is a cracking device. The iPhone, the mobile phones and tablets are brilliant for that kind of thing. But when you listen to the board gaming podcasts, it doesn't detract from gaming. In fact, they found that it very much can help the gaming industry. I can't remember which company it was. It might have been Mayfair Games, were saying that they're launching the apps for their games actually increased the sales of their physical games.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is just pie in the sky, but I'd love to see that you had your drain board, you set your army up, and you had a friend over in America who set theirs up, and you held your phone up or your iPad up, and it augmented their models onto your board.
Yeah, there's
and you
potential
can almost play that sort of a game where you move your models and then you can see your friends on your iPad because it's all augmented, and you go, right, I'm going to fire this unit at that unit, and then you roll the dice and it does the measurement for you and says, oh yeah, that is 18 inches, yeah, you can fire, roll the dice, and it'd be great if you could do things like that where you could play at home but you could be playing your friend who's in a different country.
Yeah, there's lots of potential, and it'll be interesting to keep a track on that and how far away we are from it in reality. When you look at the level of technology we've got now in the new iPad, the details they put out for it, it's quite stunning when you think back. The iPhone's 10 years old this year, and where we've come to it with that, and where we're going from there on. Virtual reality is becoming, affordable in the home. Whether you've got the space to play it or not, that's a different matter. But Oculus Rift and those kind of things are now in people's homes. Who knows where we go, but humanity, I think, will always crave that interaction. So I don't think you're ever going to lose out on that. And GW, where do they stand as a miniatures company? Will they ever not want to be selling miniatures, or will, as you say, that interaction have to come through additionally photographing your miniatures as well? Or include them some way. But there's lots of things. It's cool, and it's really interesting to keep an eye on what's going on there. Yeah, excellent. Beyond that, we had GW also in the news because we know their financials did well. We've already talked about that, the share price. I don't know if you've seen the kind of... There's been chat around the release of 40k because that happened post those financials, and there's been a couple of articles that have basically said... I think there was one of them, GW is now, or currently, the highest performing, online on street retailer, taking over the big shops. It was at that period of time, which may have been a very short period of time. I don't know if it's carried on. I don't keep that an eye on it. Saying that it was outperforming Debenhams, I think, was the previous best, and there was it appeared to be a bit of a tongue-in-cheek say that ahead of Brexit, maybe Games Workshop's one of the things we should be pushing. Not just Games Workshop, but the whole miniature industry is actually a massive strength of the UK. Because who else is really doing what goes on in the UK? And I don't mean GW in that. I'm meaning there's a lot of games companies that are based there, and obviously you've got big ones around the world as well. We're not saying that Privateer Press or Weird Games or Battlefront, but you could probably name 5, 6, 7 just in Nottingham around GW easily, and that's before you go down to some of the others that do Drop Fleet, Hawk and all those kind of guys as well. So and it came up in a couple of articles. I think one of my may have been The Guardian, one of the guys there, and it was quite a tongue in cheek. One of them in one of the articles actually said, oh, don't get me wrong, if I had time to paint my models, I'll be home playing Blood Bowl with my son right now. We've got to a point now where, and we've seen this in other industries, people who are making making films, people who are making TV shows, people who are, particularly in the creative side of things, had played Dungeons & Dragons or Games Workshop games when they were little. Because that's what you do when you're a creative person. You get into Dungeons & Dragons, those kind of things. And,
yes,
and
definitely.
And now, 20, 30 years later, the people, particularly like writers, what do you do if you want to write stuff, you write. And that might be writing a campaign for you to post. If you want to be an actor, then Dungeons & Dragons is almost built for you, isn't it? And now these people have got to a point where they can share their fun, their adventures they've had in Warhammer, D&D, what have you, and they're in a position where people don't laugh at them for it, and all that does is strengthen it.
And I think there's been a definite shift, hasn't there, in how our sort of geekiness is perceived. We've got things like the program, like the Big Bang Theory, and all this sort of stuff, where there's almost a level of cool about it where there never used to be, and people actually respect it a bit more than I think they ever used to. And people, I think, are more open to accepting these sort of things now. I remember when Lord of the Rings came out, the film. I think before that time, if you mentioned that you like Lord of the Rings, you were tarred with a LARPing brush that you were dressing up and running around caves.
Yeah.
And then Lord of the Rings film came out, and everyone loved Lord of the Rings. It was like a shift in the dynamic.
Computer games had the same thing in the 90s. It really hit big when the PlayStation came out and targeted like the kind of almost the ravers, really. Like Wipeout was a game at the time with the heavy dance music on it, which was quick, was bright. It was very much, and it was played in clubs when it came out. It was like, wow, people are putting a PlayStation in their club so people can play Wipeout in that environment. And all of a sudden, it was like, well, actually, computer game is starting to become cool to the point now where it's just assumed that people play some game or another, whether you play Battlefield or whether you play, even Candy Crush. That's a computer game. Right? It's a basic computer game, but it's a computer game. It's become part of society, and whether miniature gaming ever gets to that level, Dungeons and Dragons. I've got people talking to me about Dungeons and Dragons who you look at them and the way they dress, the way they act. 10 years ago, those people wouldn't even. They'd walk the other side of the street if they thought you played Dungeons and Dragons. We're getting to a very interesting period of time, which is awesome. Which is really good, because it only means that the hobby can grow in a healthier environment. Obviously, it brings some issues, and we need to be, as a community, kind of aware that we've got to accept everyone in a way, because almost sometimes you get a bit protective of I've been doing this for 30 years, get out of it. But also, when you become a larger community, you just get more friction naturally anyway. But, it's cool. It's really good news. And all exciting on the go forwards. And then the other little bits definitely we missed were Black Library. So we've had the announcement for Old Earth coming in December. Probably going to be, I think it's actually definitely going to be available at Black Library Weekender. And the cover of Vulcan, and this is like the end of the Salamanders story, like the major Salamanders story in the Heresy. This is their third part of their arc by Nick Kime. I think we've got November. There's no set release for the Heresy, but we've got Black Shield's audio this month, Fulgrim and Ruinstorm in October, and then Old Earth. So I've got some reading to do. I need to get some stuff out of the way to line up for them, actually. too much stuff going on. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. I think we've covered most things. Is there anything else you want to add? We're going to
just the usual contact.
Yeah, so again, I think we'll have to have a painting episode soon just to keep Neil in check. So if you've got any, and I'm quite happy to go really basic with this. I think it's easy, as I said earlier, it's easy for us to go maybe a step too far when we're talking about competition painting, but sometimes it's the simple things that you forget, that some people just haven't had that thought process, haven't worked through themselves. Maybe I'll pick something up as well. So if you've got any of those, send them in, and any topics for the show as well that you want, then hit us up. Greg at theimperialtruth.com.
And Neil at theimperialtruth.com.
And you can also get us all on the Twitters and the Instagram. So at Child of Fang for me.
And at Neil Paints everything.
Yeah, and even you will have seen, if you're following at Neil Paints, he already has posted pictures of Corax. So he's a good boy for once.
And a nice blurry table shot.
Yeah, we will try and get him to post more and more, and I'm keeping up with my painting progress, hopefully catching up. So might even get some a night army done by the end of the year, with a little bit of luck. But I think we're pretty much there. One thing is, I don't say this every time because I don't like to hammer it home too much because it will get really dull. But if you like us, let your friends know. I'm not going to go and preach, but just drop it somewhere. Maybe put it on Twitter that you're listening to. You enjoyed the last episode. Really helps kind of get listeners in. We're not everyone's cup of tea. We're fully aware of that, but you never know who might get something out of this show. And if you do like us on iTunes, then a review on iTunes is always welcome. Always welcome. We might have to do something in that respect, but yeah, it's always helps the show get out there and get around a bit more, which we like, because we just want your love. That's all we do this for.
That's all we want.
Just what we like people to tell us they like us.
The only time we actually ever find out is if we're ever at an event and someone comes up, because that's the weirdest thing usually when you're walking around an event. Someone goes, "Oh, you're so and so," and you go, "Hello, who are you?"
Yeah, I get a little bit. I've had some emails about recently about things we could do better as well, not just for the show but for Fanatic as well, and that's fine. Semi-polite information is better than not polite at all. But I can take it, the point was valid. I can't argue with that. And we're always going to try and do things better. Remembering that we are very much amateurs. and we've got stuff planned to come up, and hopefully see the end of the year off strong. And we got more events. So we got Blood and Glory coming up, and plenty of stuff at the start of next year, and hopefully organising more events that I'll be running as well next year. But there we go.
I'm going to try and get to lots more painting ones, so hopefully we can get a mixture of bits and pieces on.
Yeah, I have to get you playing the game again, Neil.
Yeah, do you know, it's funny, a friend of mine actually recently said, "Oh, what are you doing with your Night Lords army?" And I went, "Well, once I actually get it painted, I might try and actually play a game with it."
You gotta find some way of putting that up your priorities.
Yeah, I think the problem for me is trying to steer clear of the lure of a painting competition. Because you finish one and you think, well, that's it now, I'm not going to do another one for a while, and then you just instantly go, could do that into that one, and
how about
look straight back in again.
How about Golden Demon Squad category?
Yeah, I've tried that in the past, but I think you need to push yourself a bit more than what you would use in your army to win.
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking. But it means you're entering a demon and painting a unit, the Andy Wardle style.
Yeah, I think my thing to get my army done would be to try and set a different target, like armies on parade, or I'm going to go to this event and I want to win best painted army.
Well, there we go.
That's my goal, and then I'll try and.
How about going to a Games Workshop event, a Warhammer World event next year, with your Night Lords and trying to win best painted?
See that? Yeah, I think that might be something I'll try and do. Because
have you ever won one of them?
Nope, never.
You're rubbish then. Ben Greaves has won like 3, I think.
Has he?
He's won more than. I think he's definitely won one. I don't know how many he's won. To be fair, I'm probably making that up.
His stuff is great, though. I mean, I must admit, his armies always look so great on the table, don't they?
But there we go. He hasn't won a Slayer sword, so that's embarrassing for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that might be the next thing I have to do. I have to look at that next sort of, right, what am I going to do to push myself?
Definitely. Get the smallest army possible.
Yeah.
And an airbrush.
Maybe, yeah. Well, how small can you make him in Heresy? It's got to be
5 knights? 6 knights?
6 knights. Well, yeah, but they're big models.
Yeah, but that makes it easier.
Talons. Surely Talons could be
Talons, in terms of numbers, Talons is small with a few big vehicles, yeah. Yeah. And also that kind of army as well. But yeah, it'd be fun. You can do very small Talons army. Or you have to go full on Pride of the Legion salamanders or something like that and take all the fire drakes.
Yeah, well, yeah. Actually, a green army could work quite well. A real bright green army.
Well, there we go. Awesome stuff. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you for listening. Unless you've got anything to add, Neil?
No.
Awesome. You have been listening to The Imperial Truth.